Some experiments are meant to push the boundaries of human knowledge, and others, they should have never happened at all. Governments, rogue scientists, and secret organizations have conducted some truly terrifying experiments, tests so dangerous, unethical, or outright horrifying that they were either buried forever or exposed way too late. We're talking about mind control projects, biological weapons, and science so reckless that it could have wiped out entire populations. These aren't myths. These are real experiments that were so extreme that they were either shut down or classified to keep the public in the dark. So buckle up, guys, because today we're uncovering 15 of the most secret and dangerous experiments ever conducted. And trust us, you won't believe what we humans are capable of doing in the name of science. Number 15, Operation Sea Spray. In 1950, the U.S. Navy decided to test biological warfare on unsuspecting American citizens. Their experiment? Spraying a bacteria-filled mist over San Francisco to see how it would spread in a real-world scenario. For 6 days, the military covertly released Serratia marcescens, a bacteria that was thought to be harmless, into the air. Residents unknowingly breathed it in, while scientists monitored its effects. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, it turns out the bacteria wasn't harmless at all. Soon after, several people were hospitalized with rare infections, and at least one person died. Worse? This was just one of many secret biological warfare tests the U.S. conducted on its own citizens during the Cold War. Operation Sea Spray was finally exposed years later, but by then, the damage was done. The government insisted it had stopped testing on civilians, but honestly, who really knows? Number 14, the Stanford Prison Experiment. What happens when you give ordinary people absolute power over others? In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo set out to find out, but his experiment spiraled into horror way faster than expected. The Stanford Prison Experiment took 24 college students, randomly assigned them as guards or prisoners, and locked them in a simulated prison. It was supposed to last 2 weeks, but after just 6 days, it had to be shut down. Why? Because the guards became monsters. They started humiliating, abusing, and psychologically torturing the prisoners, some of whom had nervous breakdowns. The prisoners, on the other hand, became submissive and broken, accepting their mistreatment as if it were real. Zimbardo himself admitted he let the abuse go too far, only stopping when an outside researcher demanded he end it. This experiment proved how easy it is for ordinary people to become cruel under the right conditions. And honestly, it's terrifying to think about. Number 13, Project MK-Ultra. Ever heard of mind control experiments? The CIA actually tried to make it a reality, and the results were horrifying. During the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran Project MK-Ultra, a top-secret program that experimented with LSD, hypnosis, and psychological torture in an attempt to create real-life mind control techniques. Who were the test subjects? Unwitting citizens, prisoners, and even military personnel. Many were drugged without their knowledge, forced into sensory deprivation, or exposed to brutal psychological conditioning. Some victims never recovered, while others mysteriously disappeared. The government tried to cover it up, but in the 1970s, declassified documents revealed the horrifying details. While the project was officially shut down, some believe similar experiments continued under different names. The scariest part? We still don't know the full extent of what happened, because most MK-Ultra documents were destroyed before the public could ever see them. Number 12, the Soviet human-ape hybrid experiment. Yes, you read that right. The Soviets tried to create a human-ape hybrid, and it wasn't a joke. In the 1920s, Soviet scientist Ilya Ivanov was ordered to breed a new species of super soldier, one that was strong like an ape, but intelligent like a human. His plan? artificially inseminating female chimpanzees with human sperm and vice versa. It didn't work, thankfully, but Ivanov kept trying, even setting up a secret lab in Africa to conduct more tests. When none of the experiments produced results, he was arrested and sent to a Soviet labor camp, because apparently, even the USSR thought he went too far. Despite failing, this project proved that the desire to create hybrid creatures has existed for a long time. And with today's advancements in genetic engineering, some fear we might be closer than ever to making such a nightmare a reality. Number 11. Unit 731. If you thought Nazi experiments were the worst of World War II, think again, because Unit 731 might have been even more horrifying. During the 1930s and 40s, the Japanese military ran Unit 731, a secret biological warfare research facility. But this wasn't just research, it was human experimentation on the most nightmarish level possible. Prisoners were infected with deadly diseases, subjected to vivisections, dissections while alive, and even used as test dummies for new biological weapons. Some were locked in freezing temperatures to see how long it took for frostbite to kill them. Others were exposed to poison gas just so scientists could observe the effects. The most terrifying part? After the war, the US secretly gave immunity to many of these scientists in exchange for their research data. That means some of these war criminals walked free, all in the name of science. Number 10. The Philadelphia Experiment. One of the most controversial secret experiments ever might have happened in 1943, when the US Navy allegedly tried to make a ship invisible to radar. The result? The ship vanished completely, along with its crew. According to conspiracy theories, the USS Eldridge was outfitted with an experimental cloaking device. But instead of just turning invisible to radar, witnesses claim the entire ship briefly disappeared from sight, only to reappear moments later with horrific consequences. Some say the sailors were fused into the metal of the ship, while others reportedly suffered mental breakdowns or vanished entirely. While the US Navy denies the experiment ever happened, some believe the government covered it up. Was it a real attempt at teleportation, or just a mix of rumors and paranoia? We may never know, but if it really did happen, it proves the military was messing with forces they didn't fully understand. Number 9. The Nazi twins experiment. During World War II, Dr. Joseph Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death, conducted some of the most horrifying experiments in history at Auschwitz, many of which were focused on twins. Mengele was obsessed with genetics and wanted to understand how to manipulate human traits. His twisted experiments involved sewing twins together to create artificial conjoined twins, injecting chemicals into their eyes to try to change their color, and exposing them to deadly diseases to compare how their bodies reacted. Those who survived the experiments were often executed to allow autopsies for further study. The most disturbing part? Mengele escaped after the war, never facing justice for his crimes. These experiments didn't just violate ethics, they were pure evil disguised as science. To this day, the survivors of his horrific tests tell their stories as a reminder of how far science can go when morality is ignored. All right, guys. Now, let's move to Number 8. The Green Run. During the Cold War, the US conducted countless nuclear experiments, but the Green Run was one of the most reckless. In 1949, the government secretly released a massive radioactive cloud over Washington state to study how radiation spread in the environment. Without informing the public, scientists at the Hanford site deliberately released radioactive iodine-131 and xenon-133 into the atmosphere. The fallout spread for miles, contaminating the air, water, and soil. Residents had no idea they were being exposed to dangerous radiation. Later, reports revealed that the radiation levels were hundreds of times higher than what was considered safe. While the government eventually acknowledged the test, they downplayed the risks. To this day, some believe the Green Run was responsible for a rise in cancer cases in the region. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes citizens become test subjects without their knowledge and only learn the truth decades later. Number 7. Project Sunshine. Imagine waking up to find out that the government had stolen your loved one's body, all in the name of science. That's exactly what happened during Project Sunshine, one of the most disturbing nuclear experiments in history. During the 1950s, scientists wanted to study how radiation affected the human body. But instead of getting consent, they secretly took body parts from dead infants and children, without telling their families. These stolen samples were used to measure radioactive fallout from nuclear weapons tests. Grieving parents had no idea that their deceased children's remains were taken and dissected for experimentation. When the truth finally came out, it sparked global outrage, forcing governments to change how they handled scientific research. Project Sunshine proves that even the most respected institutions can cross terrifying ethical lines, and that when secrecy is involved, no one is safe from becoming an unwilling test subject. Number 6. The Havana Syndrome Experiment. In recent years, U.S. diplomats and intelligence officers started experiencing bizarre neurological symptoms, including dizziness, memory loss, and intense headaches. Many believe they were victims of a secret experiment involving an unknown weapon. This phenomenon, known as Havana Syndrome, first appeared in 2016 among American diplomats in Cuba. Some experts think they were targeted with directed microwave energy, a technology capable of damaging brain tissue from a distance. Others believe it could have been a sonic weapon designed to disable people without leaving a trace. Despite years of investigation, no one knows exactly what caused Havana Syndrome or who was behind it. Some suspect a foreign government was testing a new kind of weapon, while others think it could have been a failed U.S. experiment gone wrong. Whatever the truth is, one thing is clear. Someone, somewhere, has developed a weapon that can attack the human brain remotely. And that's terrifying. Number 5. Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA had some seriously wild ideas in the 50s and 60s, but Operation Midnight Climax was on another level. This covert experiment involved secretly drugging unsuspecting people with LSD to see how they would react. Here's how it worked. The CIA set up fake brothels in San Francisco and New York, where prostitutes, working with the agency, would lure men inside. Once there, the unsuspecting victims were given LSD without their knowledge, while government agents observed them through hidden mirrors. The goal? To see if LSD could be used for mind control, interrogation, or as a truth serum. Some subjects reportedly experienced psychotic episodes, hallucinations, and complete mental breakdowns. Worse, none of them had any idea they were being used as lab rats. The program was eventually exposed, but by then, the damage was done. It's another dark chapter in the CIA's history of unethical human experiments. Number 4. The Soviet dog-head transplant experiment. If you think Frankenstein was just a story, think again. In the 1950s, Soviet scientists actually tried transplanting dog heads onto other dogs, and the results were horrifying. Led by Dr. Vladimir Demikov, these experiments involved grafting the head of one dog onto the body of another, creating two-headed abominations. Shockingly, some of these poor animals survived for a few days, with both heads able to move, drink, and react. Demikov claimed his work was a step toward human organ transplants, but let's be real. This was pure nightmare fuel. The ethics of the experiment were non-existent, and even today the footage is enough to give anyone nightmares. While his research did contribute to modern transplant surgery, it came at a horrifying cost. And the fact that scientists are still experimenting with head transplants today is enough to make you wonder, what if they actually succeed? Number 3. the Chinese CRISPR baby experiment. In 2018, Chinese scientist He Jiankui made a chilling announcement. He had genetically edited human embryos and brought them to term. The result? The first ever CRISPR-modified babies, designed to be resistant to HIV. The world was shocked and horrified. While gene editing was a known technology, nobody expected a rogue scientist to take it this far. The global scientific community condemned the experiment, warning that gene editing in humans could lead to unforeseen consequences, including mutations, genetic diseases, and permanent changes to the human gene pool. The Chinese government quickly arrested and silenced He Jiankui, sentencing him to prison for violating scientific ethics. But the real question remains: how many others are experimenting with human DNA behind closed doors? If one scientist could do it, imagine what military labs or secret organizations might be capable of. With this technology advancing rapidly, human genetic modification is no longer science fiction. It's here. And that's both exciting and terrifying. Number 2. Project Starfish Prime. The Cold War was full of reckless nuclear tests, but in 1962, the US decided to take things to the next level of insanity, detonating a nuclear bomb in outer space. And yes, it went horribly wrong. This 1.4 megaton explosion, codenamed Project Starfish Prime, was meant to study the effects of high-altitude nuclear detonations. Scientists thought it would just create a harmless light show in the sky. Instead, it fried satellites, knocked out radio communications across the Pacific, and caused electrical surges as far away as Hawaii. But the real disaster? The blast trapped radioactive particles in Earth's magnetic field, forming an artificial radiation belt that lingered for years. This made space travel far more dangerous and damaged multiple satellites in orbit. At the time, scientists had no clue what would happen. What if the explosion had caused permanent atmospheric damage? What if it had disrupted Earth's magnetic field forever? Luckily, we survived, but this experiment proved that when humans play with forces beyond their understanding, the results can be disastrously unpredictable. Number 1. The Large Hadron Collider. In 2008, when scientists activated the Large Hadron Collider, the most powerful particle accelerator ever built, some people feared it might create a black hole that could swallow the Earth. Sounds ridiculous? Maybe. But here's the scary part. Even physicists admitted they weren't entirely sure what would happen. The LHC smashes subatomic particles together at nearly the speed of light, recreating conditions that existed seconds after the Big Bang. This experiment is meant to uncover the secrets of the universe, including dark matter, extra dimensions, and even the nature of time itself. So, what's the risk? Some theories suggest that high-energy collisions could create tiny black holes. While most scientists argue they would evaporate instantly, the fact that we're deliberately recreating cosmic forces we barely understand is enough to make anyone uneasy. We've been lucky so far, but with even more powerful colliders being planned, the question remains, what if one day we go too far? If you have enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.